Ready for a deep dive? This one might leave you questioning everything you thought you knew, honestly.
Oh, sounds intriguing.
Yeah.
What are we digging into today?
We're cracking open astrotheology and shamanism, Christianity's pagan roots, and wow, it's a wild ride.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Just from that title alone,
Yeah.
it's a bold statement.
Buckle up, because Jan Irvin and Andrew Rudijit, the authors, don't hold back. They're basically saying those core Christian beliefs we think of as, unshakable.
Right, the bedrock of the faith.
They might actually be built on a foundation of ancient paganism.
Wow. So how do they even begin to make that case? Where do they start?
They take us on a journey through, well, everything, etymology, symbolism, you name it, tracing those threads of Christian tradition back to some surprising origins.
So they're kind of like detectives uncovering a hidden history.
Exactly. And this is where astrotheology comes in.
Astrotheology. Okay, you're going to have to break that one down for me.
Honestly, before this deep dive, I had never even heard that word either. But it's all about the stars, the connection between Christianity and the cosmos.
Okay, I'm listening. Christianity and the stars. That's a new one.
Right. But think about it. Imagine a time before modern science when the sun, moon, and stars weren't just like pretty lights in the sky.
They were powerful forces. I get it. People lived and died by the seasons, the cycles of nature.
Exactly. They were deeply intertwined with life on Earth. That's the world of astrotheology.
Okay, so what are they saying that Christmas being so close to the winter solstice isn't just a coincidence?
That's just the tip of the iceberg. Irvin and Rudijit dig much deeper, pointing to things like the Star of Bethlehem guiding the wise men.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Or even the 12 disciples mirroring constellations. I've heard that one before.
Exactly. They're suggesting that astronomical knowledge is woven into the very fabric of Christian tradition, often in ways we don't even realize.
Hidden in plain sight. I like it. So is that it? Astrotheology, and we're done.
Oh, we're just getting started. Next up is the whole shamanism thing.
Shamanism. Okay, now we're venturing even further into uncharted territory. Lay it on me.
From what I gathered, this is where the idea of psychedelic plants, like magic mushrooms.
Whoa, okay. Things just got real interesting.
Right, it's where they enter the picture.
Hold on, are you saying what I think you're saying? That early Christianity and psychedelics, they're connected?
That's what Irvin and Rudijit are suggesting. They argue that shamanism, particularly the use of entheogens,
Which is just a fancy word for.
those mind-altering plants, yeah. They're suggesting they might have played a significant role in shaping early Christian practices.
So some of the visions and mystical experiences at the heart of Christianity might be linked to, well, magic mushrooms.
Essentially, yes. They argue that those altered states of consciousness, often induced by those plants, were a fundamental part of ancient religious rituals.
Okay, hold up. Now I'm really starting to see where this is going. But how much of this is speculation? What kind of evidence do they have to back this up?
That's what we'll dive into next time. So last time, we left off with this big question mark. What kind of evidence do Irvin and Rudijit use to back up their claims about, well, everything?
Right, because it's one thing to say Christianity has these hidden connections to astrotheology and shamanism, but it's another thing to prove it.
Exactly. So how do they connect those dots? Where do they even begin?
They pull from a lot of different places. Comparative mythology, linguistic analysis. It's like they've pieced together this giant puzzle using all these seemingly unrelated bits of information.
Okay, that makes sense. But I've got to admit, I'm still struggling to see how all this fits together. Like, how can you look at the Bible and suddenly see psychedelic experiences hidden within the text?
Well, they talk a lot about how ancient cultures used symbolism and allegory to convey complex ideas, especially spiritual ones.
Right, like a secret code hidden in plain sight. But give me an example. How does that apply to the Bible specifically?
We'll take the story of Moses and the burning bush. It's a pretty well-known story, right?
Right, God speaks to Moses through this bush that's on fire but doesn't burn up. It's about as biblical as it gets.
Exactly. Now, the traditional interpretation is that it's a divine encounter, a miracle.
Makes sense. So where do the psychedelics come in?
Well, Irvin and Rudijit suggest that this burning bush could be a metaphorical representation of a psychedelic experience, a way of describing something that's difficult, maybe even impossible to put into words.
Okay, so it's like they're seeing the Bible through a different lens, interpreting those stories through the framework of altered states of consciousness.
Exactly. They point to those hidden in plain sight symbols, just like you said.
Mhm.
One example that really jumped out to me was their analysis of halos.
Halos. You mean those circles of light around the heads of saints and angels and whatnot?
Exactly. We usually interpret those as representing holiness, right?
Yeah, like a visual shorthand for this person is extra holy.
Precisely. But Irvin and Rudigeet propose that those halos, especially when you look at how they're depicted, that radiant light, sometimes geometric patterns, they could actually be visual representations of altered states of consciousness.
Hold on, so instead of just holy light, those halos might be hinting at psychedelic visions. That's a pretty radical interpretation.
It is, and that's what I appreciate about this book. Even if you don't buy into everything they're saying,
Mm.
Irvin and Rudigeet force you to reconsider those assumptions, those things we've always taken for granted.
It's like they're saying, don't just look at the surface, look deeper, question what you think you know.
Right. And speaking of questioning, a big part of their argument hinges on the etymology of certain words, Christ and cross particularly. They spend a good chunk of the book digging into the linguistic roots of those terms.
Okay, so it's not just about reinterpreting images, it's about reinterpreting the very language we use. Why is that so important to their argument?
They're trying to show that the language of Christianity itself is rooted in much older traditions, potentially traditions that were connected to, you guessed it, altered states of consciousness.
So Christ might not just be a name, it could be a title with a whole other layer of meaning, a hidden history.
Exactly. For example, they trace Christ back through Greek to even earlier linguistic roots, and they suggest it could be connected to words for anointing oils, even entheogenic substances.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see how they're building their case. They're drawing on all these different threads, symbolism, history, language, to create this intricate tapestry that links Christianity to these ancient, potentially psychedelic practices.
And they don't stop there. They go even further by arguing that this connection wasn't just ignored or forgotten, it was actively suppressed. And that's where the Pharmacratic Inquisition comes in.
The Pharmacratic Inquisition, now that's a phrase that makes you stop and think.
Right. It sounds like something straight out of a Dan Brown novel. But if you really think about it, it's a pretty unsettling concept.
It is. So break it down for us. What are Irvin and Rudigeet really getting at with this idea?
They're suggesting that there's been this, well, systematic effort throughout history to suppress knowledge of entheogenic plants and practices.
Because they were seen as dangerous.
That's part of it. But they go deeper than that. They're arguing that it wasn't just about safety. It was about control, maintaining power. These plants, these experiences, they had the potential to, in their view, challenge the existing power structures, both religious and political.
So if people started having these mind-blowing mystical experiences on their own, maybe they wouldn't need the church or the state to tell them what to believe or how to live their lives.
Exactly. It's like those in power had a vested interest in making sure those ideas, those experiences, stayed buried. And Irvin and Rudigeet even go so far as to link this to the modern war on drugs, suggesting it's a continuation of this ancient pattern of control.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. So if they're advocating for access to these entheogenic experiences, what does that look like? Are they saying everyone should go out and try magic mushrooms?
Not exactly. It's more nuanced than that. They're not about handing anyone a step-by-step guide to spiritual enlightenment.
Right, it's not like they have a 10-point plan for achieving enlightenment.
Exactly. They seem to be encouraging a more personal approach, one that's rooted in self-exploration, in questioning, and in connecting with what they believe is this ancient universal wisdom that's been, in their words, suppressed for far too long.
Okay, so it's less about following a dogma and more about finding your own path.
Exactly. And while that message is appealing, I think it's important to acknowledge the elephant in the room here.
You mean the fact that exploring altered states of consciousness can be, well, a little unpredictable.
Exactly. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. Even with the best of intentions, things can go sideways.
Right. We're talking about powerful substances, powerful experiences.
And that's something that Irvin and Rudigeet don't really delve into in great depth, the potential risks, both psychological and even legal.
Which is understandable. They're historians, not therapists or lawyers. But it's definitely something to keep in mind. So for our listeners who are now fascinated by these ideas, but maybe also a little hesitant, what's the takeaway? How should we be approaching all of this?
I think the key is balance.
Yeah.
Approach these ideas with a healthy dose of both curiosity and skepticism. Astrotheology and shamanism presents a compelling case, but it's important to remember that it's just one perspective.
Right. It's not the be-all and end-all of historical or spiritual truth.
Exactly. So do your own research, weigh the evidence, and ultimately form your own conclusions.
It's about being open-minded without being gullible.
Precisely. And remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Right. There's always more to learn, more to explore.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe in the process of exploring these ideas, you'll uncover your own hidden truths.
Love it. So, to our listeners, keep those minds open, keep questioning, keep exploring, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.